So the fabled edgy version of Scarlet arrives at last, and with it continues the trend of Type 3 DPS Pilgrims. It's not every day we see a rocket launcher damage dealer, and it's certainly not every day that we see a solid win code DPS, because we've literally never had one. Is Edgy Scarlet the win version of Red Hood that we all hope to be? In this guide and analysis, I'm gonna go over how to build and play Scarlet Black Shadow, and how to make the best use of her abilities in the game. My name is Sefhi, and it's time to find out why the weakest Brazilian male decided to reincarnate in Nikke. Let's get started. A lot of players, including myself, were excited to see Scarlet's kit, mainly because she is win code. If she turns out to be a top tier DPS, then we would finally be able to complete the collection of having at least one good DPS for all 5 of the elements. I'll even include a chart on the screen for the DPSs that I consider top tier in each element. I think we're well on our way to another aspect of game design where each character's kit leans more into buffing or taking advantage of a certain element. Sure, you can kinda argue that Nor, Guilty, and D are win code DPSs, but they don't exactly excel in the damage dealing department. Edgy Scarlet, or as some people call her, Scarbs, has a lot riding on her shoulders coming into the roster, so let's find out if she's really worth it. I will be using my criteria for skill leveling same as last year, but I'll be adding one more option for situational times. Sometimes there's certain skills where the requirements are more nuanced, and I think it's more intuitive if I listed when to invest in certain skills. In case you're wondering why the cutoffs are levels 4, 7, and 7+, it's because skills require the second tier modules past level 4, and the third tier past level 7. Okay, so Edgy Scarlet, win code, attacker class, rocket launcher user. Before we can even talk about the 3 skills, I want to go over the gimmicks Scarlet has with her weapon. She is not your typical rocket user. You can see that the full charge time for a shot is lower than typical rocket launchers. Let's use A2 for comparison. A2 has a charge up time of 1 second by default, but she hits for a larger AoE and for more damage than Scarlet per shot. However, A2 has a unique animation delay that prevents you from just spamming this out. People thought the same when it came to Scarlet, when they saw the short charge time, but as it turns out, she doesn't appear to have any noticeable lag on the animation. In fact, putting her on auto is just as fast as manually controlling. In return, you can also see that Scarlet's explosion AoE is much smaller, though I don't know what I was expecting from firing a shockwave from a sword. She does have 9 shots in one magazine, which is actually the highest shots per mag for a rocket user. Again, I'm not even sure what counts as a magazine in this case. Skill 1. When firing a fully charged shot, an effect will trigger depending on the times you fired. Each effect does not stack and will reset when all 3 have triggered. At 3 shots, damage will be dealt to the enemy with the lowest defense, so passive single target damage. At 6 shots, distributed damage will be dealt to all targets within the attack AoE. If you see my 2B guide, distributed damage works differently than normal damage. It basically takes a unit's final attack percentage and splits it or distributes it among all the enemies. Meaning even though it hits for a wide area, this realistically works best if there's only a single target. Same goes for 9 shots. It will instead deal damage to everything, but again only as distributed damage. This skill gets a high priority. The reason is that with help from Scarlet's burst, these passive effects will trigger pretty frequently. I just want to emphasize that you do need to fully charge up the shot to count for this skill, so spamming out rockets is out of the question. Skill 2 is a max ammo boost upon burst, and will also instantly refresh a percentage of Scarlet's mag. The cutoffs are 60% at level 4 and 100% at level 7 and onwards. Despite looking really good with a full mag refill, this skill will be the first to get the unique priority. Because of certain team comps, this skill should be either level 4 or 7. The reasoning is that from teammates and overload lines, we can get infinite ammo with Scarlet with just a level 4. Of course, with other comps, or if you feel more comfortable, then feel free to level this to 7. My philosophy is that if you can get away with saving resources and not leveling a skill, then just don't do it. I'll explain how the infinite ammo thing works later, but for now, you can let your modules rest easy. Since the ammo refund caps at level 7, there's no point of going higher. The Burst, a huge attack and charge damage up, as well as tripling the rate in which skill 1 triggers. The attack up maxes out at over 100%, which is an incredible amount. The Burst gets medium priority. You can leave it at level 7 in case you're hurting for resources. Due to the compounding effects of skill 1, that one is more important. But this is still a good investment into doing more damage, and I would suggest to max this one out too in the long term. So now we're gonna talk about gearing. And I'm gonna bring out the new and updated Overload lines tier list I made. I'm splitting the tiers to required, as in it's best to have a certain Overload line for a unit to work well. Improvement, meaning a line will increase your damage in a meaningful way. Situational, don't need to explain this. Filler means the stat is better than nothing, but better ones can be rerolled for more results. And useless, meaning the stat is not helpful in any significant way. I'm actually gonna put something in required this time. Max ammo capacity. However, you just need a minimum of one line of it. This ties to how to get Scarlet to have infinite ammo. When combined with a high investment Bastion cube, you can, in most cases, continuously fire rockets without needing to reload. This is because the instant ammo refill from skill 2, assuming level 4 or above, is able to trigger without the magazine emptying. So you just get another round of firing without having to reload. You can do this reliably in one of two ways. You either leave skill 2 at level 4, then having one line of max ammo, use the Bastion cube, then run the bunnies. I tried putting the game on auto in the shooting range, and Scarlet will have no need to reload, as the ammo increase from overload gear, nor an ammo refund from the Bastion is enough to sustain Scarlet. I don't believe the Bastion needs to be at level 7, but it certainly does help. The other way is more costly, but having many max ammo lines, a level 7 skill 2, and the Bastion, you can kinda make it work as well. Obviously, I can't test this thoroughly as I can't just toggle overload lines on demand, but even if Scarlet needs to reload every now and then, it's not gonna be a huge blow to your output. On the improvement tier, we have elemental damage and attack. You might be surprised to see elemental damage on here, as it usually goes in situational. And this is because Scarlet's main selling point is her element. She's certainly not the first to be a top tier DPS, and a question I will ask myself when choosing which team to form is, why would I choose Scarbs over someone else? She's currently the only solid win DPS in the game at the moment. So while you can choose to not roll for elemental damage, it almost seems like a waste not to have it. You can, of course, ignore this if you're still new to the game, but if you're following this overload gear section of the video, then I expect you to have overload gear unlocked to begin with, which means you're approaching the late game and already have a decent amount of the DPSs available. Skipping the situational tier, we have most of the rest stats in the filler or better than nothing tier. Charge speed, charge damage, crit rate, crit damage. If you're wondering why charge speed is this low, it's mainly because the previously mentioned stats should all take priority over this. Charging shots faster is obviously an improvement versus if you didn't have it, but there are ways to buff this in the team section too. And then on the useless tier, there's defense. I don't need to explain this. You're a DPS, why are you stacking defense? And hit rate, because rocket launchers don't benefit at all from this, as you can't somehow make an explosion more accurate. Harmony cubes. I'm gonna make this one easy. Most of the time, the uncontested best one is the Bastion cube. If you don't have one invested, you can still get some decent ammo refund from it to increase the uptime of skill 1. If for whatever reason you can't run it, then Resilience or Wingman can be a placeholder, but I would recommend putting Bastion on. So I'll briefly touch upon this, as I'm sure some people will be wondering. Do you need to manually control Scarlet? Well, the short answer is no. While she does share a unique cooldown between each shot, the community did find a way to bypass that, but it's not exactly consistent. For the time being, you can just put her on auto, as the attack speed really isn't bad at all. As you might expect, continuing the Type 3 Pilgrim's ease of use, Scarbs uses any existing meta support cores quite well. This includes any combinations of a CDR unit, defender, and healer. Using your typical leader novel core, bunnies, or Tiga, you can piece together a good team for facing bosses. I do want to state that I found Scarbs to be way better suited for boss stages versus campaign, despite her being a rocket launcher user. The small explosion AoE and distributed damage gimmick just doesn't mix well with crowds of small fry enemies. Just use Modernia for those levels instead. For a sub DPS role, you'll get some benefit from Alice or Maxwell, who both buff attack and charge speed. Honestly, I wish they just made another unit like Maxwell. She's just way too useful. One of the best teams for Scarlet is the Bunny setup, pairing Scarlet with either Alice or Maxwell. This is an extremely restrictive comp, but it's the easiest to use with the least requirements in overload lines. Leader for cover repair and CDR, the Bunnies for defense and max ammo buffs, and Alice/Maxwell for more attack and charge speed. You could of course run any other setup of meta supports. The main takeaway for Scarbs' teams is that because she technically doesn't bring anything new except for being a win code DPS, think about why you will be running Scarbs instead of someone like Red Hood, while other DPSs already have other buffs that allows them to be better at their niche. I would say if you were to pick Scarbs for bosses, it would be one that does not have many parts. This sus-looking rocket launcher doesn't have any pierce, but it still does some pretty good sustainable damage. So Edgy Scarlet, despite having nothing too unique with her playstyle, still manages to find a spot in the top tier DPS department. I ran several tests with different bosses, and I found that she does some solid damage, even surpassing some of the ones existing in the game. Assuming Alice doesn't pierce anything, Scarlet can actually outdamage her even when I was manually controlling. Sure, at the end of the day, she's not Red Hood, but during my Red Hood guide, I did mention that we'll await the day we finally got a win code version of her, and that time is now. Well, kind of. Scarlet Black Shadow gets a 5 out of 5 rating from me. She fills in the last slot as one of the DPSs for each of the 5 elements. It will no doubt be really good in the upcoming January solo raid. This New Year event is already pretty packed, with 2 running Pilgrim banners with a low drop rate. I hope you were able to get a copy of Scarbs and did not make the mistake of not allocating 6,000 gems for the step-up recruitment. That would have been really bad. I got a 2023 yearly overview that I hope to release in a week or so. If you enjoy Nikke content just like this, you know what to do. Thank you for tuning in to the first guide of 2024, and always remember, have fun with the game.